is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Tonight we have an exclusive interview with Rishi Sunak, done by GB News' Liam Halligan, from the British Beer Festival. No, I'm actually not making it up. We're then going to be joined by Arron Banks, who was debanked shortly after the Brexit referendum campaign and his business virtually ruined. We'll find out the role that Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, played in all that. And today is Alcohol Tax Day, as alcohol taxes go up by the most in 50 years. We're being told by the Chancellor and the PM that somehow pub drinkers will be 11p a pint better off. We'll tell you tonight why that is just the most almighty con. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. The top story from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has told GB News housing illegal migrants in hotels and flats is completely wrong. In an exclusive interview, Rishi Sunak said alternatives, such as the Bibby Stockholm barge currently moored off Portland in Dorset, are being sought as interim measures. The floating barge has been fitted out to accommodate around 500 people, and the first 50 of those are expected to move in possibly this week. That's after fire safety inspections are completed. The Prime Minister responded to concerns that luxury flats are now being used for asylum seekers in Chelmsford in Essex, while local people struggle in substandard homes.
What's going on currently is completely wrong. We've got a situation which is unfair. British taxpayers are forking out £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels and other accommodation. That's clearly wrong, it's clearly unfair, and that's why I want to put an end to it.
Meanwhile, more than 3,000 people crossed the English Channel in 63 small boats last month. With an average of 52 migrants per boat, that's the highest number on record. More than 14,000 have made the dangerous crossing so far this year. Well, the Prime Minister's introduced today what he's calling the biggest shake-up of alcohol taxes in a century. As you've heard, the move focuses on taxing drinks, but on their strength this time, with duty on wine and vodka, for example, to rise. Touring a beer festival in West London today, Rishi Sunak claimed the overhaul made things simpler, fairer and would benefit thousands of businesses. But the British Beer and Pub Association warned it would cost the industry an extra £225 million in tax. More on that in Nigel's programme coming up. Now, breaking news this afternoon, we heard that the MP Margaret Ferrier has been stripped of her seat after a recall petition which triggers a by-election. She's been charged by police and suspended from the House of Commons for breaking COVID rules back in lockdown by travelling from London to Scotland after she tested positive for COVID in September 2020. Nearly 12,000 constituents in Rutherglen and Hamilton West signed the petition. It's going to be the first recall by-election in Scotland. A British man who ended the life of his seriously ill wife has visited her grave for the first time since being released from prison in Cyprus. David Hunter was sentenced to 2 years for the manslaughter of his wife after claiming she'd asked him to end her life at their home in Paphos in Cyprus in 2021. The couple's daughter said today she believed her father wanted to say his goodbyes properly. Now, finally, a drone delivery service has been launched in Orkney in Scotland, helping local people receive their mail more efficiently. A collaboration between Royal Mail and drone company Skyports means the scheme will transport letters and parcels between the islands, hopefully with significantly improved delivery times. The service will initially operate on a trial basis for 3 months, but if it's successful, it could be established as a permanent service. You're with GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Back, though, now to Nigel.
I always think that politicians ought to be what they are, particularly political leaders. Never pretend to be something different. What, in God's name, our Prime Minister, a near-billionaire teetotaler, was doing hit Olympia today at the British Beer Festival, well, let's say I thought his presence there would be somewhat incongruous. But, of course, it was a big announcement today on alcohol duties and the PM trying to give us the impression that beer is going to be 11p a pint cheaper. We will get to all of that in a moment. But whilst he was there, he did give an exclusive interview to GB News' Liam Halligan. Let's have a look at some of it right now.
So I think it's good that Nigel Farage and Coots are in dialogue resolving the issue there. But Nigel Farage also spoke about the broader issue of this impacting other people. And that's my primary concern, because ultimately this isn't about any one individual. This is about values. Values that are important to me and important to our country. Values. Hang on, this is really important, rather than the individuals, to focus on the values that are at stake. Values of freedom of expression and privacy. I believe in those values very strongly. People need to be able to have lawfully held views that we might not agree with, but they shouldn't be denied financial services because of them. And they're entitled for their financial affairs to be kept private. I think those values are fundamental to who we are as a country. They're fundamental to me, and that's why I said what I said.
Almost a quarter of a million GB.
Well, let's be frank, there haven't been many Conservative Prime Ministers that have been nice about me, let alone supportive of the values that I stand for. So that, I think, must be a good thing. But will he act? Will we see real changes forced upon the banks and changes to legislation? I wonder, what do you think? Do you think Rishi is all talk, or do you think he will act? Give me your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.com. Now, Liam Halligan, GB News' economics and business editor, was also at the British Beer Festival, I suspect fitting in better with the punters than the Prime Minister.
That's my natural milieu.
I've been many times. It's a heck of an event, isn't it?
It's an amazing event. It just shows you the strength and depth and the variety of beers being made across the UK. Really, really great place to be.
Yeah, and small brewers and cider producers and all of that. No, I mean, it really is, joking aside, it really is a good event. Now, the PM there, yes, he was being quite supportive of my case, wasn't he?
He was indeed. I think I pressed him on whether or not he thought Howard Davis should resign. It would be a hat-trick for you if you've got the CEO of Coots and the CEO of NatWest, the chairman of NatWest, who, of course, rather ill-judged as it turned out, he backed Alison Rose, saying, I have full confidence in her, and a few hours later she resigned, possibly because they'd had a phone call from the Treasury who'd been looking at Twitter and public opinion and so on. But he did support you, and I do think those words were heartfelt. I didn't quite expect him to say he thought Howard Davis should step down, but it's a kind of a story that he defended him to some degree. But I think he is just carrying on, isn't he? Rishi Sunak, exactly what he said at the Commons dispatch box. He thinks that the way you were treated by Coots was wrong, quotes, fundamentally wrong. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have barely been able to bring themselves to say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're all over the shop on this. I mean, Keir Starmer actually was quite supportive and said it was wrong. Rachel Reeves was a mile from that.
She accused the media of bullying Alison Rose or something.
We're going to have a clip from Rachel Reeves a little bit later on with Arron Banks and get his view on that. Liam, it's the first time you've been on since, you know, the resignations last week and the apologies I got from the BBC. Looking at it sort of, you know, a step back with a bit of cool reflection, this has really shone a light on a big problem, hasn't it?
It has. Anyone that thinks this is a story just about you doesn't understand the story, frankly. And I think you would agree with that more than anybody. What this shows is some of the ridiculous, pretty nefarious activities that go on in big institutions, even ostensibly private sector institutions. So in this case, NatWest is owned 40% by the state because they did such a great job in the run-ups to the global financial crisis, i.e. they had to be bailed out. But it strikes me that there is a really important principle at stake here, and never again can people say, oh, all this woke stuff, it's just being kind, you're just being paranoid, you just need to move with the times, the idea of being cancelled it's all a myth. That's often what people say, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you can no longer say that, because anyone who takes the time to read the dossier that Coots put together about you, a dossier which you only got under threat of legal action with your, pretty expensive lawyers, but it's all there in black and white. It's absolutely clear. They say 2 or 3 times, we can't find an economic reason to get rid of this guy, we just don't like him.
Yeah, I mean, we're all inclusive and lovely, unless, of course, you disagree, and then we're going to be excommunicated, effectively. Now, Liam, big day on alcohol duties. Tell us the truth. What's actually happened today?
OK, what actually happened is, while he was doing walkabout at the Great British Beer Festival, and also when I was interviewing him up on a mezzanine, which everybody in the hall could see, he was heckled quite severely at some stage. Why? Not because I think British beer drinkers are fundamentally, left-wing or anything. I don't think any. No. I would suggest, and you know this part of the electorate better than me, he's probably got quite a lot of natural supporters among, the campaign for real ale and people in small towns, rather small C Conservative, and yet he was heckled. Why? Because despite all the Treasury spin, what's actually happening today is alcohol duty is going up by 10.1%. It's been frozen since before lockdown. It's now going up by 10.1%, which is the rate of inflation last September. And that means that publicans are going to have to absorb that margin, or your beer and wine and spirits are going to go up by 10.1%.
So it's 90p extra duty on a bottle of gin. It's 44p extra on a bottle of wine.
That's right.
But the big spin is that there's a Brexit bonus that beer's going to be 11p cheaper. It's not, is it?
There's actually, apart from that headline, which isn't really a headline, which should be the headline, that we got, a big increase, now an above inflation increase in alcohol duty across the board. There are 2 other little angles. One angle is, and you could say there's some sense in this, is we're going to an ABV system, alcohol by volume system. So if you drink a wine that's less alcoholic or a low alcohol beer, they will go down. If you drink spirits, they're going to go up a lot, and a lot of distillers are really upset about this. That's why the Wine and Distillery Trade Association, they're saying that this is the biggest one-off increase in duty for 50 years. And then the other little bit of spin is what they call the Great British Brexit pint guarantee. And this is saying, the Treasury is saying that they will make sure that duty just on draft beer in a pub, which is a very small part of a pub's outlay, by the way, revenue, draft beer, the duty on that will be cheaper, they're taking 11p off it at the moment, than it would be if you bought beer in a supermarket. The trouble is, the supermarkets can discount their beer and make it a loss leader to get you through the door and compete with the pubs that way, and the pubs may not be able to pass pass on that duty saving because they've got so many other massive overheads and they have to pay more duty on everything else that they sell.
Everything else is going up. Yeah.
Everything else they sell was the vast amount of their turnover. So it's almost as if Rishi Sunak is raising alcohol duty while telling the punters to expect cheaper beer when they go down the pub, which is going to give a lot of landlords a real headache. They're trying to absorb all the margins. And one of the hecklers I interviewed at for GB News at the beer festival, a very articulate guy. He runs a pub down in Wimbledon in South London. Yeah. Really knows his business. He thought it was disingenuous and actually disgusting. They were the strong words he used, and he didn't strike me as anything but a natural conservative. And yet he said that because he didn't like the Treasury's spin that they were putting on it. He said, I'd have had more respect if they just told us they have to raise alcohol duty, you know, because it's been frozen for the last 2 or 3 years.
So let's just work this out. We've got direct taxes at the highest they've been since 1951. We've now got a massive rise again on indirect taxes. And, you know, I had the Taxpayers Alliance in here last night saying we're just wasting money hand over fist on public projects like HS2. We're spending money badly. Does there ever come a point where the taxpayer says enough?
Well, maybe we'll see that in the next election, but who are they going to vote for? Because it's not as if Keir Starmer's going to be a kind of low tax person. The overall tax burden is at a 70-year high, Nigel, at a time when the economy is struggling to grow. And, of course, the idea that you should lower taxes to grow, people say that that's been discredited by the mini-budget back in September under Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. I'm not sure that a lot of the public really feels that. A lot of the media and political class would say that. But I think the public know instinctively that they want to keep more of their own money. And if you want to get this economy moving, we've got to get the state off people's backs. Yeah. And I think Rishi Sunak is now starting to get that, or I do think that's his real instinct, to be honest with you. I think he's
I keep hearing this. I keep hearing this. You know,
let's see.
Boris Johnson, the great freedom lover, locked us down 3 times. I keep hearing we don't really want to do this, but they've been doing it for 13 years.
We're now getting to the business end of Rishi Sunak's premiership, right? Yeah. Could be an election within a year, probably within 15 months, say September 2024, right? And what's he doing? He's just said 100 new oil and gas licences for the North Sea. He's talking about at least at some stage lowering taxes. He's trying to appeal a bit more to, you know, the silent majority, as the Tory party see it, rather than the more left-wing Tory reform group or Labour voters.
The mood music is better. But as I said at the top of the show, on the banks and other things, thank you, Liam, will he act? Is it all talk? Is it all spin? Well, there's far too much of it. He's the biggest spinner since Tony Blair in number 10. Now, I know you didn't think that we were living in the old days of East Germany, but what happened to Arron Banks in the wake of the referendum wasn't very far away. In a moment, we'll talk about how Banks was debanked and how Andrew Bailey, who could have played a role, who's now the governor of the Bank of England, was completely and utterly silent.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So I asked, will Rishi Sunak act on the words? Ryan says, I'm rather sceptical. We've had plenty of tough talk with regards to immigration, but with very little action. Another anonymous says, Rishi is incapable of doing anything. He's all talk and no action. And Liz says, I'm afraid Sunak is a great example of all mouth and no trousers. Well, one person who has never been afraid to give his view and come from the world of business, insurance in particular, and to found Leave.eu, who I work with right throughout that referendum campaign, and put a considerable sum of his own money into that campaign. But Arron Banks, who joins me now, you suddenly became a victim of the great Russia hoax. And what I noticed through that period, and I was shocked, they did it to me later, members of Parliament using parliamentary privilege to accuse you of taking Russian money.
Yeah, I mean, parliamentary privilege used to be a thing that was used as a privilege. Now it's just routinely used to smear people. I mean, Chris Bryant and Ben Bradshaw and others have routinely used it in Parliament to make accusations that they weren't prepared to make outside Parliament. And that's really how a lot of the Russia conspiracy started.
Yeah, and then The Guardian, or a journalist on The Guardian, picked this up, kept running with it.
And you've got to remember, it came from America, first of all. Trump was accused of the same sorts of things. And that when they saw that getting traction, then they thought, well, this is fantastic, we'll try it in the UK. But it started in Parliament first.
Yes, and there was no evidence produced at any point for this, and the Electoral Commission investigated this, and you appeared famously before the DCMS committee.
Yes.
When you walked out because it was lunchtime. Maybe that's why they punished you. But
I felt at the time I was one of the most investigated persons in the UK by the National Crime Agency, the Metropolitan Police, the Electoral Commission, and so it went on. And it was a never-ending process.
Yeah, you were not to be forgiven for backing Brexit.
That's
what it really came down to. Now, important to say before we go on that you recently won a substantial amount of money in a libel action against that Guardian journalist.
That's right.
So the Russia stuff is over.
Yeah.
No one's going to say it again.
I mean, she was found guilty of defamation, serious harm, and she produced no evidence to back any of this stuff up.
Now, we always think, Arron, in this country that somebody is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
What happened to you, your business, and Barclays Bank?
Well, in essence, I was in the office one Monday morning and a Barclays manager came in with 27 white envelopes, put them on the table, bang, 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 one after another. And they all related to companies I either owned. One related to my brother's law firm, which was accidentally delivered to me. So effectively, it was all companies I banked with Barclays for years, including a large insurance company and broker, who they debanked, if that's the right term, with 90 days' notice.
And how many clients did you have?
Nearly 500,000.
Nearly 500,000 people insuring their cars with you. and they stopped the Barclaycard services.
At one point after 90 days, and it was impossible for an insurance company to change bank in 90 days. I mean, if you think about the technology involved of websites and the whole thing, it's not a Turkish barber where you can just disconnect the the credit card machine. I mean, there's 500,000 customers. They cancelled Barclaycard. We had customers uninsured, people on the road without insurance, and the FCA knew about this and did little or nothing about it.
Well, this is the interesting part, though, Arron, isn't it? It's who was in charge of the Financial Conduct Authority at the time. Now, reveal his name.
It was Andrew Bailey, who's the governor of the Bank of England. Now, I think what's got to be said is that Barclays, stuck to their word, and we had to change banks, but we managed to get extensions out of them based on, our chairman, who was quite a senior figure, city figure at the time, writing to people like Andrew Bailey and others. But at the end of the day, the FCA knew about it and did nothing.
But the revelation that fascinated me was the private conversation that took place at a grand Mansion House dinner between the chairman of your company, as you say, respected, I mean, Remainer, but it doesn't matter, respected city figure, was working with you, and Bailey said to him in private conversation that he had concerns about the way Barclays
Well, he said he had concerns the way Barclays behaved. Indeed, our chairman had written to the chairman of Barclays Bank saying that since Mr. Banks has been convicted of nothing, other than allegations that have proven to be completely untrue, the only conclusion he could come to was that this was politically motivated. And we know from a raft of other instances that, particularly with regulators, and, we've got a dispute going with a German insurance company at the moment that cancelled us over political, my political beliefs. This stuff is pretty regular.
Did it nearly, did it nearly put you under?
Yeah. I mean, it did. I mean, it was a very stressful 6 months, not just for me, for all the 1,500 staff that worked for me, and all the, luckily the customers didn't know anything about it, but it sure was stressful.
Yeah, no, awful. Now, Barclays have been asked for comment, and a Barclays spokesman said, while we cannot comment on individual accounts, we comply with our legal and regulatory obligations. We would only withdraw banking services from an individual business in exceptional circumstances. Well, I've never heard such rot in all my life, because it's not just Barclays, it's banks across the board that have been debanking people. Arron, you've never spoken out publicly about this before until the last couple of days.
I'd just like to say as well, Nigel, you've done everyone a great service, because one of the other things you can't do, and you've managed to do using your public platform, is it uses a blackballing system. So if a businesswoman were to speak out about it, they would effectively be blackballed by every other bank, and therefore they have to keep quiet because they've got no alternative.
Yeah. Well, Arron, something big has to be done. Now, I think something big has to be done quickly, because this was the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, the other day, when she was asked about Dame Alison Rose, the person that leaked about me to the BBC, that breached all the basic rules of banking. This is what Rachel Reeves had to say.
I don't like some of the, frankly, what I see as bullying attitudes towards her. She's the first female chief executive of NatWest. She took over at a time when that bank had real big problems. It seems to me that Alison Rose has done a good job turning that bank around, but I don't know the details of this specific case. Let me say this, if I was in the Treasury at the moment, rather than Jeremy Hunt and his Conservative ministers, I'd be spending my time this summer trying to ensure that families in Scarborough, like the ones I've spoken to today, are properly protected during this cost of living crisis, rather than picking a fight with banks on behalf of Nigel Farage.
There we are, Arron. You see, basically, Dame Alison, having broken every rule of banking, should have stayed because she's a woman.
Yeah.
So if we're going to get banking reform, it's going to have to happen before she's Chancellor, isn't it?
I would say so, but the Conservatives have got 18 months to fix it. I mean, I thought for a long time that a bank account is a service. These are near monopolies, and they act like monopolies. I mean, one of the reasons you would have, that dossier that was produced from Coutts Bank is that they have agencies that produce these files that actually note down things like you may have been accused of something, and then it's used to blackball you. And the actual facts of the matter are very rarely brought out. They use the information to stop you getting a bank account, which is, it's equivalent of having a water or electricity. It's a utility.
It's a basic right, isn't it? Yeah, we need
basic right.
We used to have it before the post office was privatised, and I'm going to have Sir Vince Cable on in a few days to ask, well...
Nigel, it's simple.
Go on.
The only change the government have got to make is that a bank must give an explanation of why they're shutting the bank account. They should not have the right just to shut it without any explanation.
Well, Andrew Griffiths...
It's a very simple change.
Andrew Griffiths says they're going to bring that change in.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak has been supportive. Yeah. Let's see whether they act.
It's a very simple change, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's an important one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sharing your story. What I don't know about you folks, I think what happened to Arron here, because he simply wanted to back Brexit and an independent Britain, was truly shocking. Now, the Bibby Stockholm we've been talking about in Portland Harbour, a statement out tonight. The Bibby Stockholm will not be taking new arrivals, that's the new term, tomorrow. It could now be next week, as the council's guidance is they don't want new services beginning on a Thursday or Friday close to the weekend. So you see, they are acknowledging that this will impact tourism there in Dorset. The delay is because working practices for port workers have to be signed off further help by the Health and Safety Executive. There are no fire safety issues, is what the Home Office confirms. Now, this big rise in alcohol duties, apart from draft beer, we're going to talk in a moment to a pub. Yeah, we're going to join the 6 o'clock club in a pub up in Norfolk, and we're going to have in the studio a gin distillery from Kent and get their reaction to this biggest rise in duties in 50 years.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Victoria MacDonald is on the National Executive Committee of the Campaign for Pubs and the landlady of a pub. And we're going to go live right now to the Green Dragon in Wyndham in Norfolk. It's a 700-year-old pub. And I understand tonight, Victoria, it's quiz night. So hopefully you're going to be very, very busy. And simple question, is draft beer going to be 11p a pint cheaper?
Simple answer, no.
What?
It just can't be. That's not the way duty works. Well, as the end producer, obviously we buy from those that make, and they will set their prices accordingly. And whilst we would all love to think that this government was supporting the pub and making it cheaper for draft, that's not the reality, I'm afraid.
You see, I mean, I've got a feeling, Victoria, that there'll be a few people there that have heard the Prime Minister on the 6 o'clock news or whatever it is and think, oh, this is really good news. I mean, you know, he even went to Olympia today and he was pictured pulling a pint. I mean, this is going to be a big disappointment to many drinkers, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I think we've all reached the stage where we don't believe that there are going to be tax cuts, and I don't think anyone really thinks that the government has got the pub at its heart. You know, we are still, I think it's the third highest in Europe for beer tax, always have been. And we will just continue to have to absorb what was the increases back to the normal VAT rates, increases in energy, minimum wage, now the cost of living crisis. So no, we just don't believe them, and it just will not filter through. I think I've looked through my prices, and the best I've got is I'm saving half a pence on a pint of cider.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the spin today from the Prime Minister absolutely is not going to match reality in pubs at all. We've also been covering stories about a lot of the big pubcos quite happy to close pubs because they can redevelop them as flats and make more money that way. I mean, just give me 3 things you'd like to see the government do to help the Great British Pub.
Oh, well, instantly VAT. And then, to be honest, probably a cut in VAT and a cut in VAT. And I know outcriers may say, well, hang on, you know, what about X, Y, and Z? This is an industry where, I mean, the latest figures in this morning were 30 pubs a week have been lost in the first 6 months of this year.
Yeah.
That's hearts of the community. And unfortunately, it will only ever increase. If the government want to help us, it's a cut in VAT, because 10% of something is better than 20% of nothing. That's the reality.
Yeah. And for punters coming in and buying gin and tonics, whiskies, glasses of wine, they, of course, far from going down, are facing quite big increases, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I know you've got a gin distiller on today. Yeah. I was talking to one yesterday. He's going to put his up at 80 pence. There's another local one. It's £2 a bottle. And then just remember that the VAT will be paid on top of that duty.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's 20% on top of that extra as well. So these are small businesses. The big boys, the Heinekens of this world, they're putting their prices up 14, 16% across the board. The supermarkets will be able to absorb those differences that's supposed to have made the difference between us and the pub. But it's a small businessman like myself, like hundreds of others like us, and the small brewers and the distillers that will be hit.
No. Well, you're standing up, Victoria, and fighting for the industry. Please go on doing it, and thank you for joining us and telling us the truth, the reality, this evening.
Thank you.
Now, there's been something of a gin boom in the country over the course of the last few years. I've even got involved in it a little bit myself. And I'm joined right now by Stephen Russell, founder of the Copper Rivet Distillery in Kent. Hello there. Welcome to the programme. As I say, you know, the Prime Minister there at Olympia, you'd think there was something to celebrate. So many small gin distilleries have opened up all over the country. The consumer's got better choice than they've ever had. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And I kind of get the feeling people are drinking quality over quantity, which is, again, a good thing, not a bad thing. But what does today's news mean for you?
Well, I mean, for the industry at large, I mean, it's really bad. I actually think more about the consumer. I mean, I think people talk about 76 pence, 90 pence extra. It's not that. I think what people don't realise is that in a decent bottle of spirits, you're already paying about £9 worth of duty. And then you're also paying between £3.50 and, you know, maybe more, up to £5 in VAT. So you're already, in a bottle of spirits, you're paying, you know, up to £14 of tax already. And for me, the question is, you know, how much more can we contribute?
And for you as a distiller, you know, for every litre of gin or every 3/4 of a litre bottle of gin you produce, how much duty are you paying per bottle?
Well, I mean, we pay exactly what it's generally it's passed through to the consumer. Actually, that's why I worry more about the consumer.
Yeah.
Actually, in this case, most producers will pass that on again because most of our transactions happen outside of the duty framework. So it's a question of demand. We've decided actually that we're going to wear this increase.
Are you?
Because for whatever reason, but we've decided that we will wear it. For us, it will cost about 50 pence per bottle's worth, which is an extra cost when you look at, this year, energy costs up by four times. The cost of grain, you know, we make all of our alcohol from grain, which is locally farmed, supporting local agricultural communities. It costs 60% more. The cost of bottles is 60% more. And now this is, I think, again, another...
And they reckon by the time it gets to the consumer, it's going to be 90p a bottle plus VAT. So it's over a quid a bottle when you're buying at the supermarket or the off-licence or wherever you're online or wherever you choose to go. Of all these distilleries that have boomed, I mean, how many are going to stay profitable in your view?
It's really unfortunate. I mean, only today I was invited to participate in an auction of the equipment of a distillery, which unfortunately in Scotland has gone bust. I mean, that literally happened today, and of course there'll be more. I mean, it means that it's slightly unsustainable. That's a shame because the spirits industry in this country is a great success story, as you say. You know, quality, choice. Overseas, as I'm sure you've experienced, people look to this country.
Well, I mean, you know, I remember going to America, you know, in the late 1980s, and if you ordered gin, they look at you as if you were somewhat weird. And now the bars in America are stocked with British brands of gin and a big range of... And, of course, the whiskey industry is a very important export market and very important for the Scottish economy. No, it really, really matters. So they're tough times for distilleries overall.
I think so, absolutely. And, I do, from a spirits perspective, really struggle with, I think Liam earlier referred to the change in the calculation methodology as perhaps making sense. I think the Treasury described it as common sense. But I'm not sure that that's as clear-cut either. So you pay more duty for spirits than you do for lower strength alcohol.
Yeah.
But very few people sink a bottle of spirits. Normally they dilute it. So a typical measure is 1 unit of spirits.
And the 32 units in a bottle?
A pint of something like that.
Yeah.
A pint of beer would be 2.6 units. So it's not clear to me that this is common sense at all.
No, what they did say, by the way, was that pre-made gin and tonic in tins... that was not going to go up because it's incredibly weak. And the only people that drink that are people on trains, from what I can see. Because,
politicians, if I remember correctly.
There was one called Diane Abbott who I think was caught out doing that. But it almost, the fact they boasted about that almost goes to show you, I think, in many ways, that those that make the law, Stephen, have absolutely no idea about the end game. Well, look, good luck with what you do. You're part of this great gin boom, and it's been a wonderful thing for consumers, and we wish you really, really well. And thank you.
Thank you.
For coming in. Now, some more villagers, the What the Farage moment. Watership Down, that great novel, of course, that came out. Richard Adams, and still, decades on, kids know about Watership Down. I've been up and walked on Watership Down. Well, now there's a plan for a blooming great solar farm right next to Watership Down, and the locals are revolting. Yes, they're not pleased at all. The argument is this amazing place that produced the book, the film. I never knew rabbits could be so vicious. But the idea is that they don't like it because farmland should produce food, and I'm with the locals on that. And one last segment here, a real What the Farage moment. So Devon Archer, for many, many years, was the business partner of Hunter Biden. He is testifying before a committee in Congress. Now, you might argue he's a former partner of Biden, of Hunter Biden, and maybe he's got a grievance, but he has told that committee that on 20 occasions to his knowledge, Joe Biden Sr., who of course was the Vice President of America at the time, was on open calls with their customers. And where were their customers? They were in Ukraine, they were in Russia, and they were in China. And what is beyond doubt is that Hunter Biden made many, many millions of dollars in between the drug binges and much else, made many, many millions of dollars on the back of his father being the vice president. Let me tell you something. If anything like this had happened when Trump was in office, there would have been an impeachment within a few days. And I just get a feeling that the Bidens have absolutely got away with murder, and it can't continue. In a moment, a huge diversity row. Yes, a famous chef, Thomas Straker. His chefs in his team, well, they're all white and they're all male, and everybody is going completely and utterly mad. And Cyrus Todiwala is going to join me, and I'm going to ask him, if I went into an Indian restaurant kitchen, how many white people, how many women would I see? And why is there no row about that?
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Well, Thomas Straker is one of those modern-day celebrity chefs and somebody that uses TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and all of these social media channels to push what he does. And in fact, butter has been one of his great things, how to make really tasty butter. And one of those videos had 25 million views, so Thomas Straker is very well known. He has opened up a new restaurant in London, an ambitious new restaurant in London. And I'm going to show you a picture of the new team that he's going to work with. And there they are, there's 8 of them, and they're the people he trusts to work with him with Straker's, his new restaurant. Well, there is outrage about this because they're all white and they're all men, and this is seen to be a terrible thing. You know, we know that freedom of speech is under attack, but actually I begin to think that freedom of association is under attack. Who we can talk to, who we can socialise with, who we can speak to. In response to this outrage, Thomas Straker has said, honestly, people need to calm down. Firstly, there is a shortage of chefs, hospitality workers, which is true. Secondly, if you feel so passionately, please go and gather CVs for any chefs that you think we're missing in the team. I want solutions, not problems. Thank you. Well, I find the whole thing pretty extraordinary. I'm very pleased to be joined for the second time on this programme by Cyrus Toddywaller, OBE, Deputy Lieutenant, very distinguished, successful restaurateur with Cafe Spice. So simply, you know, I don't know how many Indian restaurants there are in the country, many thousands. If I went into the kitchens, how many white people would I see in there?
Maybe 0.5% at best.
And how many women would I see in those kitchens?
Well, you would not see, mostly you would not see white people in our kitchens. In some restaurants, yes.
Yep.
There is, even though you try and encourage as much as you can to attract them, it's not seen as somebody who is capable, or not capable rather, or compatible with the cuisine, the history, the taste, etc., etc., etc.
I mean, you've come to this country, you've settled in this country,
yep.
You've grown to love this country and been enthusiasts for it, and we spoke about that before when you were on the programme. What's wrong with us? Because why is this guy Straker getting so much stick? Why would Indian restaurateurs not get the same level of stick? Is there some sort of self-hatred about the British?
I think we have become too righteous in many respects, because today the industry faces a massive skills shortage. Yeah. We are in a very critical situation, not just in modern British, French, Italian restaurants. Across the board of hospitality in Britain, we have huge skills shortages. If Thomas has a requirement for a particular skill, he, I don't think, is racist enough to say, no, I don't want somebody coloured. All he wants was people that can deliver the menu that he's going to create.
And people that he knows, and people that he trusts.
Absolutely.
And it's expensive, isn't it? You know, a hell of a financial risk setting up a new restaurant. Now, I find the abuse extraordinary, but there is one thing, Cyrus. It does seem, and I'm probably going to get condemned for this, but it does seem there are far fewer women that want to be professional chefs than men.
There is a growing percentage of young girls, young ladies joining hospitality associations and schools.
Yeah. Okay.
We see them because we run a competition, and this year's team was all-girl team that won from University of West London.
Okay.
We have tried very hard to promote Asian cuisine across the British diaspora, so that we can have young British-born budding chefs look at Asian cuisines also.
And you've been training people, haven't you?
I've been training them for years.
Yes.
Years. And slowly but gradually things are falling into place. Girls are being accepted quite easily.
Interesting. Okay.
I know kitchens where the women are bosses and they do an extremely good job. How far they stay with the industry and how far, if they get married, they get children, and how they make that work-life balance work is where the critical question always has been for ladies.
Yeah.
But by and large, I think it's growing. We have a massive shortage of pastry chefs in this country. They are like gold dust. And young girls are taking up more pastry.
So why the shortage? I don't understand this. Why do or not enough, young people want to become chefs, want to go into hospitality?
There are lots of issues. I think for one, in the past, if you look at it, the industry has an ill reputation. In one sense, it was perceived to be poor pay scales, long working hours, you work on weekends. The youth today are slightly different though. We never minded working our weekends. They do want time off. But you work in this industry to make people happy. When people go out, you got to be serving them. That's our job. But what has happened is the industry has changed, but that has not penetrated down. Parents still feel that the industry is very poor paying. The reciprocation for the number of hours put into the job are not not good enough.
Basically, young people don't want to work hard anymore.
No, we have a sort of a reputation, a sort of an image that needs to be eradicated. The industry tries very hard. There are lots of associations that are trying very hard to encourage young people to join the industry. But it's a very slow process, a slow battle.
If I'm going out for a meal, I'm going out for an Indian or whatever it may be, one of the things that will accompany my meal will be a glass of something. And that, of course, today has just become a lot more expensive, hasn't it?
100% has.
You know, I mean, is the industry seeing the cost of living impacting?
The industry is seeing many cost increases. So, like in Thomas's brigade, every other brigade, because manpower is short, it's at a premium. So there is a lot of poaching going on. And people are offering silly money for chefs to join their brigades. On the other hand, the cost of every single bit of raw materials escalated, from meat prices to vegetable prices to oils to everything. It's just gone out of bounds. You cannot input that into your menu because there is a limit to which people will want to pay for a constant increment on the menu, because it's almost constant. It's not one day that you see the price stay steady for a month. It's not happening anymore.
No.
It's constantly on a wave.
It's tough. Everything's getting very expensive. Cyrus, thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Always plain spoken. There's never any confusion about what you think, is there?
Should not be.
No, well, there never is.
The questions are very straight. I shouldn't be.
Well, I hope so. Jacob Rees-Mogg joins me. I tell you what, he's much more straight-talking now he's not a minister.
I was pretty straight-talking.
I know you were, Jacob. I know you were. Now, of course, recess is a time, I suppose, we can look at other subjects with a bit more depth.
Yes, well, actually, today we're doing critical race theory because there's an exclusive report by Charlie Peters, who's one of the GB News team.
Very good.
Very good. And it's really extraordinary what our children are being told, the effort to brainwash them about something that's been shown not to be true. So we'll be going into that in some detail.
Now, it's the 1st of August today, and it's very difficult for me, Jacob, to really get my head around the fact that the Ashes cricket has finished by the end of the month of July. But we have a whole month now of something called the 100, and we're being told we should enthuse about the 100. Will you be attending matches of the 100?
No, I'm afraid I have no interest in the 100. I enjoy the 2020. I think that's quite exciting.
It's a fun evening out.
And my children enjoy it, and it's basically cricket. What I don't like about the 100 is I don't care about these teams. I care so much about how Somerset does in the county championship. Somerset won the 2020. I was thrilled.
As your father did before
As my father did before me. And I would love to go to Taunton to see a county championship match. But
we moan about the government, but let me tell you, the England-Wales Cricket Board are far worse than the British government. They are absolutely useless. Now, we've done our best, I hope, tonight to make you think, to make you smile. One thing that will depress you thoroughly is we're about to show you the next 24 hours weather forecast.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here with the GB News forecast. Turning wet again overnight. Heavy showers replace the rain into Wednesday, but unseasonable winds, especially along southern coastal parts of England. An area of low pressure is developing over the Atlantic. That's going to move through central parts overnight. It's going to bring the strongest winds on the southern flank and some heavy rain ahead of it into Northern Ireland later this evening, passing through Wales, southern and central England, and then eventually northern and eastern England seeing the wet weather by dawn, as well as southern Scotland. Now, northern Scotland stays clear overnight, and here temperatures will dip into the single figures, but elsewhere those temperatures will stay at 13, 14, 15 Celsius. But it is a wet and windy start to Wednesday. The wettest weather will be across Northern Ireland, central and southern Scotland, northern England. Another band of rain moves through southern counties for a while, carried through on a strengthening wind with the risk of gales for coastal areas, 50, perhaps 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts. That could cause impacts if you're taking part in outdoor activities, for example, or camping. And another thing that could be impactful, very heavy showers and thunderstorms through central parts. That all clears through, and by Thursday, it's a much brighter start to the day. Some sunshine out there. Quite quickly, though, the cloud fills in and further showers develop by the afternoon.